A living wage is a term that refers to the income required for a person to meet their basic human needs. So food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. In South Carolina, that figure is around $11.76, give or take a little bit. That comes from the Living Wage Educational website. This information is very important to college students because I know personally I'm not making a livable wage. I don't make minimum wage, but like so many other college students and young adults, we don't have enough education, training, or experience to make higher wages or be in those higher paying positions. So we kind of get stuck where we're at for a while until we either graduate college or find a good opportunity. Just a little fun fact about the federal minimum wage, though. It hasn't moved in the last 11 years. So since 2009, it has remained stagnant through inflation, the changing economy, and the population growing, not only in size, but in age. So when young children grow older and then they have their own responsibilities and families and obligations, they need to be able to make the money to support those things, and they haven't been. So because of that, I am arguing that the federal minimum wage be retired and that a living wage be enacted in South Carolina instead. This would positively impact the majority of our population that is seeing these low wages. There's about 13.8% of our population right now living in poverty. That's South Carolina's population. This comes from a website that shows you statistics on all 50 states. They just break it down by state. I'll link it below. It's very interesting if you want to look at it. But because so many people are living in poverty, so many people also have very poor education. So we are ranked 44 out of 50 in education. So basically the bottom. That comes from WLTX.com. And when I first read that, I was like, what, how? Because I'm in college, I have an education, and I'm getting a higher education. But then I thought about how many people don't have that opportunity and don't have that. Like, they're not able to. They will never get that. Because so many people have to drop out of school to take care of their families in high school. Like, if you don't get a high school diploma or you don't have time to get a GED, then you're just stuck there. And that affects a lot of our education. There's also a huge population, a huge portion of the population that is so poor that they cannot go to school, like ever. So obviously we have very low education rates. I'm going to insert a figure somewhere. It'll probably take up the whole screen. That is from Cato Institute, and it shows, it compares performance rates to money spent per 2,000 students. So in the states that have more money spent per student, they obviously have higher performance rates. If you look on the lower end, though, you'll see South Carolina. Obviously, there's a few states below us, but we are down there because we are poor. We're a poor state, and we don't have a lot of money to spend on students and the resources, so our performance rates are very low. Test scores are low, and as a whole, we just don't have good education, unfortunately. So not only would enacting this living wage improve the lives of so many people, but it would also, as well as the economy and education, it would also reward the people that are working so hard and struggling so much. If you're working, you should not wonder where your next meal is coming from. Nobody should, but especially for the people that are working. They're putting into the economy and putting into society, and they're not getting anything out. And that is absolutely horrible. So, on the other hand, there is obviously some pushback to this. One of the biggest oppositions to creating this living wage is business owners and employers that can't afford to pay the higher wages. So, if they're barely getting by themselves, obviously they won't be able to pay more money to their employees. So some may have to close their business or lay people off, and obviously that would have a huge negative impact on the economy. People who are already living in poverty with the job that they have, if they were let go, it would crush them. It would hurt them more than what they're doing now. So obviously it wouldn't work for everybody, but for the majority of the population that is affected by a minimum wage, it would be beneficial. This comes from a Britannica pros and cons article on minimum wages. Another train of thought, though, is that doing this would take value away from the people who are trained and are professionals but are making low wages. So, for example, EMTs. They make between $12 and $14 an hour. And obviously they're incredibly important to society. But if you have a cashier at Target making $11.75 and you've got an EMT making $12, there's only 25 cents that separates them. And obviously that makes people very upset, because while I don't value them differently as people, their positions are drastically different, and obviously I would rather have the EMT than I would have the cashier save my life. So I get it, I understand it, but I think that this would be beneficial, like I said, for the majority of the population who is seeing these low wages. My plan would be to write letters to the state government, but obviously we know how well that works. So we would have protests, peaceful protests, and rallies until we got what we wanted. Ideally, we would see the gradual increase of the federal minimum wage, or of the minimum wage in South Carolina, until it go up $1 a year until it meets this living wage. So once we're at $11.76 or somewhere around there, it will change with the economy. So if the economy is doing really well, then it will go up. If the economy is doing really bad, then it will go down. But it will never regress to where it is now, because nobody can survive off of this. It's not acceptable. I believe that enacting this living wage would obviously improve the economy and our education rates, but it would also make people happier and make them want to work. And when you treat your employees well, your employees treat you well. So I think that this is the best decision for our people. However, there are two big questions that come with this. Where would the money come from? How would it be paid for? And who would it affect? So one, like everything, it would come from taxes. Taxes would have to increase to make up for this gap. But it would even out eventually. Like everything, taxes just come out. So what's the difference? This would affect the people, like I said, who are already seeing these low wages. So if you're making an adequate wage, you probably aren't going to notice much of a difference, except you'll see your taxes be higher. But people who aren't making adequate wages will see an exponential difference in everything, in every part of life. They will be able to afford everything they need. Maybe not everything they want, but they will be able to afford everything they need. And eventually this will help people get out of poverty.